Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now later today we will be getting into week 3 of Battlegrounds with a brand new meta, and thank god, because the week 2 meta for Gladiator circuit has been absolutely atrocious and obviously not well thought out, because powerful node completely negated power focus node, and therefore the end result was basically an arena type fight. Now week 3 is going to be much more interesting, and that is due to power snack primarily, where every 7 seconds the next buff triggered by the attacker is immediately nullified, and that will give 75% bar power to your opponent, to the defender. Also is coded as passive effect, so it will not be triggering Mystic Dispersion in itself. And then we have additional nodes on Prey on the Feeble. Whenever the attacker's buffs are nullified, expire, or fail to trigger due to a chance, the defender gains a passive prowess, increasing special attack damage by 100% until the next special attack. And each time the defender gains prowess, they also gain non-stacking passive impact charge, granting 60% block penetration for 5 seconds. Now, the important thing here is all of these effects, that penetration, the charge thing, the passive prowess, the power gain from power snack, all are passives, so that does not give any inherent advantage to Mystic champions, because none of those effects will fuel Mystic Dispersion. And here we are. So this is going to be a very interesting meta where most of the nuke heavy champions will be rendered ineffective, or at the very least will be much harder to use. At the same time, this meta will likely be largely, at the very least initially by the first looks, dominated by science champions, because it is science champions' specialty to either be immune to nullify or do not have immune to gaining buffs in the first place, which completely negates all of the nodes here. So champions like Cassie Lang, champions like Titania, obviously no buffs on them, therefore they will work perfect, and basically they will function as if there were no nodes at all. Then we're going to have champions like Overseer and Mr. Negative, who obviously are immune to nullify and will be great for this stuff as well. And then we cannot shy away from champs like Scorpion or Spider-Ham, who actually might benefit from the fact that opponent periodically gains some power due to ability to trigger their power things more often. So at large, science class is going to be the definite kind of like forte over here. That said, let's move on to other classes and other champions that I think will function well in skill class. Obviously, we will need to kind of like toss out our Valkyries, which is going to be extremely sad, because Valkyrie was one of the best attackers for me personally in the last couple of metas. But Black Cat is definitely going to function quite well, because there is no inherent buffs, and she's an answer to quite a lot of tricky fights in Science and Mystic class against stuff like Rintra and stuff like that. So Black Cat, I think, is going to have relatively good value, same as Massacre. Massacre is very powerful, fast attacker with no inherent buffs, and his playstyle will likely, finish out fights quickly enough for power snack not to be a big thing. I think Kingpin is still going to be extremely solid option, because even though he does have overpower buff, he can finish many of the fights without triggering it in the first place, just by spamming level 1. So he's not going to be ideal, but I think he's going to work well. Kate Bishop is going to be an absolute monster here. Again, no buffs in her main kit. Hitmonkey as a nuke will function perfectly. And Nick Fury is also going to be relatively viable. Obviously, we do need to be careful if you do want to trigger LMD with him. But if you're running Deep Wounds, he's going to be perfect dual-purpose champion, in my opinion, given how prominent science champions are likely to be in the upcoming meta. That said, Stealth Suit Spidey will be great, without a doubt. Moving on to the upcoming class, obviously we have Archangel, no buffs there. I think Bishop will still be very good, and this time around he's also going to be very powerful defender, in my opinion, because obviously in offense he can still work perfectly fine. You just need to be careful not to trigger those regen buffs, not to feed the power snack. So, but for the matchups that you typically want to use Bishop, like Korg, I think he's going to work just fine against like Korgs and Kingpins and whatnot. Also on defense, him having those unblockable special attacks will inevitably force opponent to Dex, which is going to give him more power, which is also going to give him the block penetration, the prowess. So I do think Bishop is going to be quite dangerous dual-purpose champion for the next match. Obviously, Domino still going to be extremely powerful, especially given her chance to fail abilities, including buffs, and thus gaining that prowess and block penetration charge that way. Omega Red, again, I think is going to be a solid attacker because there's no inherent buffs in his kit. And also, you can slow play him often, thus not giving opponent too much power, and he will function just fine. Kitty Pryde, no buffs in her main kit, definitely will be a very solid attacker. I think Havoc will function perfectly fine as well, offensively and defensively. Again, given those unblockable special attacks, that is going to be quite helpful. Sunspot nukes sweet with those perfect blocks as well. So it doesn't matter if opponent has block penetration if you have perfect block. I think Toad is going to be extremely valuable for this as well. Moving on, Tech class. Tech class is harder class kind of analyze because in Tech class, a lot of Tech champions will have harder time with, and some of the, let's say, less popular Tech champions will, however, do better. And I do think Guardian is one of those champions that will do well enough. At the very beginning, he will end up losing his armor up buff, but I do think that, baiting out the second set of Power Snack and then using him normally, I think Guardian is going to be one of those champions where you can use him well enough, if that makes sense. He's definitely going to be hindered, but so will several other Domino counters, namely Nimrod, for instance. I do think Guardian still will be an option, but that remains to be tested. Talking Hand Spider-Man from Tech Class is going to be doing fantastic, especially because he does have a bit of power control in his kit, and also the fact that, you're going to trigger that Dex at the beginning of the fight, you're going to gain all your charges, and then you're just going to go and attack and deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. Shuri, without a doubt, is going to be amazing. Shuri is probably going to be the best counter for Domino in the upcoming meta. That largely comes from the fact that she is immune to precision effects that are not her own, which means she cannot gain dex. There are no other buffs in her kit, and that means Power Snack will never trigger unless you're like dealing with like Mojo or something potentially. Warlock, I still think is going to be workable. Again, similar thing where you can lose your armor up at the beginning of the fight. However, all your power control abilities will still be working, and that should be more than enough to actually, work well. I am actually very curious, and this one I cannot promise 100% because I have not tested the interaction myself. But Will Vision, I believe either it's going to work extremely well or will need to be thrown out completely. Because it says advanced robotics provide full immunity to poison and bleed. Additionally, while she has armor up effect, Viv is immune to nullify and fate seal. If this triggers before Power Snack triggers, we're good. If Power Snack triggers first before this ability kind of gets a chance to activate, then Viv is going to be completely useless. So it's definitely something worth testing, but do pay attention to her because she could be phenomenal with her innate power control as is and immunity to nullify, that's bypassing the Power Snack. Very good. Now we have Penny Parker, no buffs on her base kit, a little bit of power control. I do think Penny Parker is going to be a very solid champion for this meta, especially because majority of the Cosmic champions will not function as well. So I do think this meta is going to be the one where Penny Parker does leave a mark to it. Meg Sentinel, immune to nullify, enough said, will be a great domino counter. Rocket Raccoon has power control. If you have 7-star Rocket Raccoon, you should be very, very happy because he doesn't have inherent buffs in his kit. And he has power control in his level 1s, thus helping you to be even more aggressive. So I think Rocket's going to work well. Although the very few Cosmic champions that will do well in upcoming meta, I think it is going to be Adam Warlock, number 1. Because as soon as you get your sovereignty buff, you are basically golden and you can start doing things. So the start of this fight is going to be where you start striking opponent's block, you get your buffs nullified, your sovereignty counter goes on cooldown, but you gain sovereignty buff, and from that point forward, you can finish the fight normally. Gallon, obviously, the Cosmic that's immune to nullify. Gallon is going to be an absolute MVP, considering that there might be an increased danger from tech champions. I think Null, as one of those few Cosmic champions that can function perfectly well, you obviously do need to keep the Power Snack in mind for the time when you will be entering Corruption due to his Awakened ability. But other than that, there are no buffs on his kit, so he's going to be a usable Cosmic champion. Moving on to the next class, Absorbing Man. I think Absorbing Man is going to be quite great both offensively and defensively. I think America Chavez is going to function extremely well with her ability to invert power gain, which will also combat power snack. So drop a couple of heavies and are basically safe. And then we are moving on to Dr. Doom. Again, lots of power control. Should function great and also will be great on defense because you do force opponents to dex. Obviously, protect these from science champions. I think Spider-Man Supreme can do well, and that largely comes from his blessing, where you gain power that opponents meant to be gaining based on how many buffs they have. And because of that, you can effectively siphon opponents' power snack power gain and reduce how many they get. You get buff quicker, so I do think Spidey is going to be a very good champion overall. Longshot is likely going to be, again, extremely great dual-purpose champion, where you can get your level 2 just by parrying heavying. He will not require you to dex a lot. However, on the other foot, he's going to be very annoying on defense unless you have a great counter. Then obviously science champions, again, as I mentioned, we have Scorpion, we have Mr. Negative, we have Mr. Fantastic, we have Piggy, we have Overseer, we have Titania, and we have Cassie Lang. All of those are going to be an absolute monsters. So science class is definitely the class to look out for in this upcoming meta. If you have a strong science roster, you probably will like this meta. If you don't have a strong science roster, you probably will not like this meta so much. So this makes me wish I ranked up more science champions. I wish I had ranked more Piggy for this one for sure. But we'll see how the rest of the week obviously works out. These are just kind of my initial predictions. But I hope this meta is much more tricky, much more fun. I hope that we all get to eat some level 3s to the face of stingy AIs, and I hope that actual, matches do depend perhaps more on drafting rather than who nukes what quicker. Like I just had a tournament match yesterday, and I had a tournament match today as well. Both of them, one of them was Gladiator Circuit meta, one of them was Victory Track meta. But both of the metas are effectively complete nuke fests, and many of the fights were decided by like 50 points, 100 points, 200 points, based on extra 3 seconds taken in a fight or lost 5% health. And I personally am not the biggest fan of that. Now, I'm not completely awful in the nuke metas. I'm still managed to somehow get up to top 10 in the nuke metas, but I definitely much prefer more complicated metas personally. Let me know what you guys like. Do you guys like stuff like week 2, where you basically just go pew pew and nuke, or you guys like stuff like week 3 or week 1 in Gladiator Circuit? That is much harder. Either way, that will be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I'm gonna catch you guys later. Bye! Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about